Hello, and welcome to a question and response session in our Vaginismus Sisters community. This is a sacred space, a beautiful space for those of us who are going through this private pain, this protective body response of vaginismus. I really don't like calling it a sexual dysfunction. You may have heard me speak about that before, and all the reasons why we really don't benefit from taking on this identity of being dysfunctional by sticking a label of, I have vaginismus, I have a sexual dysfunction. I truly believe vaginismus is something we experience. It's a temporary body response. Every single one of us is capable of overcoming vaginismus and claiming the sexual liberation that we deserve. And that is why I'm here. That is why this community exists. Now, as part of these Q&R sessions, I have realized rather recently that I never really introduced myself. And so you may actually not really know who I am. And to give you just a brief intro, my name is Katrin. I'm a fellow Vaginismus sister. I experienced vaginismus for about 6 years in my life, from the first time I tried to have PIV sex, and I was met with a brick wall. That was at 18 years old. And at 24 years old, I was able to have pain-free PIV sex. But even at that point, my sexual liberation journey really hadn't come to its fruition because I hadn't yet found my erotic confidence in the bedroom. I didn't know who I was as a sexual being. I didn't want to be simply a receptive partner for penetrative sex. I still valued that to be at the top of the hierarchy of what sex was all about. And since then, in my journey, I have done a lot of erotic healing work and come to a place of supporting women, vulva owners all around the world with overcoming vaginismus. And more than that, claiming the sexual liberation that is your birthright. So that's just a little bit about me. I've been doing this work for about 5 years now, and I absolutely love connecting with each and every single one of you in this personal way, with helping navigate this private pain. So we have question and response sessions right here inside of our Vaginismus Sisters group. You may also be watching this on YouTube. If so, I invite you to join us as part of our community over on Facebook. And every week I gather a few questions that come up. Typically it's been a few, but I am inviting you to make those, a chunk, a beautiful long list of questions that we can actually move through together. So for today, we've got 2 questions, and they both seem to be on this very same theme, questions around dilating, which for many reasons isn't actually a surprise. I'm going to read out the questions to you, and then I'm going to tell you why I don't believe it's uncommon for dilating questions to be up front and center in our inquiries when it comes to overcoming vaginismus. So I'll read both since they have to do with each other. I was really scared to move forward with dilating. I was fine, and now I'm really not. Don't know how to get me in the zone, the right headspace, etc. Take a moment to pause. Can you relate to this one? I very much can. And the second question, any suggestions on when is the right time to start dilating? So, dilating. It comes up a lot, and oftentimes, unfortunately, in the process of overcoming vaginismus that we're at least acquainted with in our journeys, it is kind of one of the priorities. It is one of the starting points, the dilating piece. And that was also the case for me, because at the time when I first started taking concrete steps to overcome vaginismus, I had been told by a sex therapist that I visited just a couple of times, because that's a whole other story in itself, that I need to buy myself these tools called dilators, and I need to start inserting the smallest one. And then when I can do that, move to the next one, and so on and so forth, with a 2-pager of instructions. That may be more than some of you have received when it comes to dilating. And it's definitely not enough of how to actually do this. And that is kind of our first invitation into learning to penetrate ourselves, is to penetrate ourselves. And it's so unfortunate that that's the basic steps that we receive from the get-go. That is the tip of the iceberg. Underneath the surface, this massive component of the iceberg, are all of the steps that are required for us to actually arrive at a place of readiness to be dilating. Because the way that I see it, dilating is at the tail end of the journey, this checklist of, considering everything that I have done with myself, the person that I am beginning to embody, right? Because it's not only about the doing, it's about the being as well. Let's see with these dilating tools how much progress I have made. And let's now come to this physical component of the process that is actually going to give me a visible cue and a visible evidence of how much safety I have actually landed in my body and in my nervous system. How much I have been able to allow myself to have an awareness and control of my pelvic floor muscles so that I could safely and in a pain-free and even pleasurable way actually allow penetration to happen vaginally. So we've got to look at all of the components of the iceberg underneath the surface to come to a place of readiness. And hence, it's no surprise that we may feel, just like in one of your questions, really not fine about the dilating process, not knowing how to get ourselves in zone and in the right headspace. When that's the case, it's oftentimes that there are some foundational components that are coming up to be paid attention to. Very often emotional energy that has been suppressed in the body that is rising to the surface and is letting us know, hey, Katrin, you had this beautiful intention to dilate, but let's hold off a second. There's something here for us to look at so that you can come back to a place of safety, of feeling ready to dilate again. And if you take the time to honor that no, the no that your body is giving you through this anxiety, perhaps through feeling like, oh my goodness, like I can't even look at my dilators right now. Or like if you were anything like me, my dilators sat in my closet for months and I would take them out and I would notice like, this doesn't feel right yet. Put them back in, have them gather dust even more. And there comes a place in the process of this emotional readiness that we're really looking for before we start having the physical component be introduced. So what do the components underneath the iceberg have to do with? They have to do with untangling a lot of the themes that are relevant to vaginismus. On an emotional level, those might be shame related to sex or lack of education related to sex. Remember the thing that we never talked about, if you never had the privilege of having sex education, or the thing that you never labeled with language, like our vulva, our vagina. We never actually refer to them as their real names. All of those things create almost like a non-existence of the topic, because what we don't give language to, in a way, doesn't exist. We don't pay attention to. I was very much disconnected from my pelvis and everything underneath the hips in my life. And part of the theme to start to untangle emotionally is becoming in connection and in celebration of our eroticism, of our pelvis, of our vulva, our vagina, our hips, our understanding of our bodies and our sexuality and eroticism on a broader scheme of things. So that's a theme. There's a theme about the subconscious fear of allowing something inside of us. Very often, since this is the most vulnerable thing that we could do as vulva owners, it is a place of finding safety with surrender rather than the control of closing. Finding safety and openness, right? So there's this theme of life to grapple with before we can ever expect for a dilator to be accepted in our body. Other themes may involve themes with repression of the feminine. Have we allowed ourselves to be fully embodied in the feminine, which I prefer to call the omega energy that exists within all of us? There may be repression there as a result of how we observed women in our lives, our mentors, our mothers, our grandmothers. How did we observe them, and what kind of qualities did we take on in our own bodies, in our own minds and nervous systems that are actually not fully in alignment with us feeling safe to surrender to penetrative sex? Alternatively, you may be more so looking on the side of the masculine, the alpha that exists within all of us, related to subconscious fears of surrendering to the masculine, of trusting the masculine. If there was any sort of lack of safety related to the masculine, lack of trust related to the masculine, as was the case for me in my life, there is that subconscious barrier and protection that exists. And hence, even though on a conscious level, we may deeply trust and love our partner to death, there is that energetic wall that's still there that we've got to process before we can expect the physical wall to come down. What else? Nervous system downregulation, right? Vaginismus in itself is the freeze response, the survival tactic between fight, flight, and freeze. Vaginismus is the freeze response. And so if we are consistently living in the sympathetic mode of our nervous system, what this means is that we're always in activity, the active side. And the parasympathetic nervous system, when that's activated, that is more so the rest and digest. And so before, again, we can expect for the walls to come down physically, we've got to allow ourselves to tap into the parasympathetic nervous system more often, and to give ourselves the rest and digest that we need and that we desire, and again, is our birthright. So in my story, I was brought up in a very left-brained kind of way, very logical, very structured. High performance is what made me valuable to my parents and in the world. So this high-achieving alpha woman was at the center stage of my life. My sympathetic nervous system, my nervous system as a whole, was shot, and I was almost stuck in the freeze response. I needed to start to learn and start to value the rest in my life, the nourishing things. See rest as productive rather than only action taking and doing and achieving to be the productive thing in life. So there's that entire theme that requires our attention. Maybe too, there is the fear that we have as a result of fear of pregnancy. And what is vaginismus? Vaginismus is the best conception method. The best method for, contraception, not conception. The best method for contraception is not allowing the penis inside. And so if we have this deeply rooted fear and non-readiness for pregnancy at this moment in our life, then guess what? Let's just shut it down. Let's just make sure there's a 0 chance of getting pregnant. And yes, splash pregnancy is a thing, so it's not quite a 0 chance, but vaginismus may be the very thing that our body decided to do in order to make sure that we don't get pregnant. So if you deeply desire to be able to overcome vaginismus, but still the fear of pregnancy is actually greater than the desire of overcoming vaginismus, then the body's going to continue doing what actually makes sense to it. And that is to put up the wall of for contraception. So maybe there's that theme that's present. Maybe it's a trauma from an injury to the pelvis. I had one when I was a child. I write about this on my Love Diary blog. When I fell between the legs on a bike rod, and I experienced a whole lot of pain in that region when I was young. And so guess what? That pain that I hadn't processed, that trauma event continued in my life. And it was one of the contributing factors for my experience of vaginismus. Or for you, it could have been a really traumatic pelvic exam or another medical exam. That's something that maybe is still active for you in your body and your nervous system that requires attention before we can dilate. So to answer the question here, my guidance and my tips, right, for what is it that is blocking me from being in the right mindset right now to dilate? Like, I thought I was fine and now I'm not. Well, the invitation is to do that deep inner work, the inner emotional work, the nervous system downregulation, as well as a lot of the components of actually coming to a place of celebration and a relationship with our vulva and our vagina that feels nourishing. So that is the whole bunch of depth of the iceberg underneath the surface. So let's say on a physical level, what are some of the pieces of evidence that you can look for in your life that you are actually ready to start dilating? Well, you've done a lot of that inner growth. The emotional processing has happened on so many levels. You can sit with your emotions. You can actually fully feel anger, fully feel rage in a healthy way. You can hold yourself through that. You're starting to feel safe in receiving, which is a whole other theme of the omega of the feminine, receiving compliments. Having success with that is a beautiful stepping stone to being able to receive another human body inside your body. Feeling deserving of receiving pleasure is huge. And then what are some of the physical things you can look for? So what if you've got your dilators out in your room and you're starting to get used to that visible cue of just having them in your presence, and then holding a dilator and being able to touch your body in a way that feels nourishing with the dilator on your neck or wherever feels good to you, being able to actually take deep belly breaths with a dilator in your hand, being able to do reverse Kegel exercises, which I teach about and guide on because that's a key foundational component on the physical side of the spectrum. Then the next step is having that dilator in your hand, but actually just sitting it on top of your vulva, maybe touching your outer labia, your inner labia with it, resting it on your clitoris and continuing to deeply breathe, the diaphragmatic breathing, the reverse Kegels, scanning your body for tension as you sit with that and really allowing yourself to feel safe in the presence and with the touch of a dilator. And then having that touch move to the vaginal opening and just giving yourself pleasure and touch on it and on the clitoris and engaging with the dilator as part of a self-pleasure practice. That is a beautiful step before ever expecting the body to have acceptance of this dilator internally. But with that, again, scanning for what kind of emotions may arise and really having a conversation with your body before just taking the dilator and inserting it of, having the conversation with your body of, are you an authentic yes to this at this moment? And if so, penetration can continue, but if not, then you honoring that no is actually going to be a fantastic stepping stone and celebration of coming to a place of conversation and honoring of yourself. So if for 20 times you have to honor the no, and you do that and the body starts to feel safe in knowing that you are holding its no verbally, rather than it having to hold your no through the closing response of vaginismus, then you're going to make a whole ton of progress because your body's going to start to know that you've got it. It doesn't have to hold the responsibility of those boundaries for you. It really doesn't. And therefore, through the path of following the no and honoring the no, the authentic yeses can start to bubble up. When that happens, our sexual desire starts to come back if we've lost it. That was the case for me. And we get to be in this beautiful relationship with the body where when the yes arises and it feels authentic and it feels real and it's there and now you can honor it, you do. And that's when penetration with the dilator actually works. The brick wall comes down, the relaxation is there. You've got awareness and control of your pelvic floor muscles, and the body actually welcomes the dilator inside because the authentic yes was present. That is the kind of physical evidence and emotional evidence that we look for to know that we're actually ready for dilating. So I saw one of you pop in to the Zoom room. If you would like to be here live with me on video, you're totally welcome to. And of course, you're welcome to keep your video off if you don't want to be on camera. But if you've got a live question for me that you'd like to come in and ask, I invite you to do that, and you're totally welcome. Okay, just know that your screen, considering it'll just be one of you inside here, is going to be present on the recording. And if you would like that and you'd like to be present here with me, I invite you back in. I saw you pop out of the waiting room. So when it comes to the readiness for dilating, that is what we're looking for. And that is why you may feel uneasy about it. Your body, your mind, your emotional body is telling you there's something more here for you. You're not quite ready for dilating just yet. Like, let's do a little bit more deep work here. And when we pay attention to this side with so much presence and celebration that we're actually taking the time to go through this, we actually make the dilating process much easier when we're getting to it. And I see this all the time with the women that I support, is that because we do the groundwork, which also includes the erotic celebration, finding who we are authentically as erotic beings, our sexual desires, being in full celebration of them. Because we do all that, when we get to the dilating piece, it starts to feel almost effortless and easier than we could have ever imagined. So that would be some of my feedback to answer specifically the first question. And I want you to know, as a closing thought here, how incredibly normal it is for you to have been scared and to be scared right now about dilating. This is such a normal experience. This is the body just warning us that there's a little bit more to work with. Now, of course, even when we truly are ready, there's going to be a tidbit part of us that doesn't feel ready. There's going to be that nervousness that's there, a little bit of anxiety, but still with the underlying layers of certainty that I've done the work. I have done the play on top of the work. I have found safety. I know how to regulate myself. I know that I can always dip a toe and come back out and find safety again if things start to feel like too much. And so even at the cusp of your quantum leap, let's call it that, of your success with dilating or anything else you're working through right now, even at the cusp of that, you're going to feel a little bit nervous, and it's going to require a leap of faith. So that's important to note, that the leap of faith is always going to be present, and listen to the underlying layers of resistance. Because if resistance feels like it's a lot, it's very likely that the best thing to do is just to take one step back and process a little bit more before diving into it again. If the resistance feels like a healthy amount of resistance that's still backed up by, you know what, I'm on the edge and this is scary, but I feel like this is my time, then you can go for it, knowing at all times that you can take one step back and come back to safety. Okay, so in dilating, that might look like a little bit of penetration, come back to safety, and that's the progress for the day, and then we can celebrate that. And then the body gets used to this win and allows for a little bit more openness next time, and so on and so forth. As for the second question on the suggestions on when is the right time to start dilating, I trust that everything I've shared so far is actually supportive with responding to this question. And there are another few tidbits of information that would be relevant here. When it comes to the right time, let's talk about the time of day to dilate. There is no one better time of day. However, for most women that I've supported, the patterns that we've discovered are that at the end of the day, there is all of the activity of the day that has already happened that may be on our minds and is maybe a little bit more difficult to um, to disconnect from. And so for most women, we found that the stresses of the day require a little bit more preparation time to actually get ourselves back to a state of presence and safety and calm if we were to attempt to dilate in the evening time. Because after a whole bunch of activity during our day, we can't just dive into it like that and feel ready and have our dilating session be a rather short one for the day, let's say, because it took less time to feel ready. On the other side of the spectrum, if we dilate in the morning, we're often more so in that vibe and in that zone of not yet having started our day and the activity of the day. And so if for you, it feels better to actually dilate in the morning, that may be the reason why it works better for you, is because you haven't yet dove into the tasks for the day. So there's no one right answer. These are the kinds of patterns that we've seen. For me personally, dilating in the evening before bed, when I didn't have to think about what I would do for the rest of the day and what my to-do list involved, actually worked better for me. Now, having said that, you may be thinking to yourself, well, Katrin, should I be dilating every day? Absolutely not. No way. We do not want to be dilating every day. We hear this about consistency quite a bit, that we've got to be consistent, and it's true. There's got to be a sense of consistency, but a sense of consistency with actually honoring our authentic selves. That's the consistency we're looking for. We don't want to be pushing through our boundaries on a daily basis just because we're supposed to dilate every day, just because that's good for us. We actually want to be consistently honoring our authentic yes and consistently honoring our no. And again, honoring that no over and over again is going to make for an incredibly fruitful session whenever the yes arises. And we're going to make a whole lot of progress that session compared to if every single time we're just trying to push through that brick wall and that tension, and we're sitting through the pain and we're actually taking steps back, even though we're dilating more often. Okay, so that's really important to note. And the next layer of this has to do with where we are in our menstrual cycle, because the timing of this is incredibly important too. You may find that you have a larger desire for sex and for pleasure in general during a certain part of your cycle. And specifically the follicular phase is going to be that upward trend, right? Then we're going to hit ovulation, and then we're going to hit the luteal phase of starting to come down, and then our bleeding time with the menstrual phase. And very likely during the slump where PMS symptoms may start to arise is not going to be the ideal time to dilate. Whereas in the first upward part of the cycle, you're actually going to feel like those dilating sessions are actually aligned with yourself, feeling authentic, you have the desire for them, and therefore they're more productive. Some people prefer to dilate during their bleed. I never did. But now that I'm enjoying PIV sex and I have absolutely no pain, and I say that, I invite you to go read my crying during sex post on Instagram, because that's going to give you a slight insight on the emotional healing that can still happen when we actually listen to some of the tightness that may exist in our vagina, where that is kind of like the 1% of time where you feel some tightness and some tension, but I'm not having painful sex anymore. And so now during this time when I'm having sex during my bleed sometimes, because I actually want to, I realize that there's a whole lot of additional lubrication that happens during our bleed. And so people who prefer to dilate during the bleed, there's a good reason for that. And it does make sense that that may actually feel a lot better with less friction and such. Still, the invitation is during our bleed that what we're doing is we're shedding, we're releasing, we're letting go, and there's only an outward cycle that happens with the blood being released. So on a spiritual level, if you can call it that, on a womb wisdom kind of level, the invitation is that we don't insert anything during bleeding, because that really is the time for shedding and for letting go and for release, rather than insertion. So that would be my 2 cents on the whether we should dilate during our period. But if your authentic body, your body is authentically telling you, you know what, I want to try this and I feel like this is good for me, then ignore what I just said and trust your intuition. That is always my go-to recommendation and invitation, is to trust yourself. And through the process of overcoming vaginismus, that's exactly what we learn to do more of, is to trust our own truth. That's why these sessions together are called question and response sessions, because I don't believe any one of us has the answer. There is no one answer that applies to every single body. There's simply a response that I can offer you based on my personal experience and all of these years of me being completely in this community and the exploration of what it means to experience vaginismus. What does it look like to overcome it? What does it look like to claim our sexual liberation? So there's a lot that I've learned, and I know that not every single thing that comes out of my mouth is going to be applicable to your body, and only you know yourself best. I have been so frustrated with having my own doctor tell me a recommendation related to vaginismus that was not, I don't know, when he truly didn't know. But his ego decided to ditch the I don't know and to give me something that made him look good. So at any point, if you ask me a question and I really don't know, my promise to you is that I'm going to say, I don't know, and let's figure it out together. Okay, that is one of the principles with how I commit to serving you. So I feel like that covered most. Let me see if there's anything else. Yeah, the other thing on timing is, if we already know that we're going through a turmoil emotionally a particular day, that is probably not a good day to be expecting too much of ourselves when it comes to dilating progress. That would be a day where the progress in your vaginismus journey is actually going to look like being with your emotions, processing your emotions, speaking with someone, getting support, downregulating your nervous system, doing some breathing exercises. When it comes to timing, we don't want to be pushing through our limits in a physical way on the days that already feel extra heavy. Okay, so that's another tidbit on the timing piece. And I trust that that covers also the second question. So since we're live streaming on Facebook here, I'm going to see if there is any live chats, live comments coming through in the chat, because you're always welcome to watch this video at the very same time that I'm live on Zoom, and to interact with me during the live stream on Facebook. As well, on YouTube, you can comment or comment on the Facebook recording that will forever live in our Vaginismus Sisters Facebook group. Okay. I look forward to our next week's session, question and response. I want you to know that there are beautiful things in the works for our Vaginismus Sisters community, so that we can bond together in creating that transformation in our lives, whatever that wants to look like in this next season of your journey. So keep an eye out. Go ahead and watch the rest of the videos for question and response if you choose to. There's lots of wisdom in there already. Oh, I see a question. Okay. This question is from Elle, and I see one of you is also in the waiting room. If you would like to be here with me, I'm just going to admit you. You're welcome to keep your video on if you would prefer. And if you'd prefer to have it off, you could do that too. And the reason I say that is because it would be on the recording for everyone. So just a piece on consent here. And there we go. Hi, Anne. Welcome to our Q&R session. If you would like to ask a question, you're welcome to voice it out or type it in the chat with your video on or off, whatever is your preference. And first, I'm going to answer Elle's question from the live stream, and that is, how can I work through trigger points? Beautiful question. How to work through trigger points involves a yoni de-armoring practice that I also call trigger point release internally. And I assume you're speaking about trigger points inside the vagina, because we may also have trigger points on our core muscles and really anywhere on the body that also may require release and may ask for release. When it comes to the vagina, we use a practice of internal trigger point release where we use either our hand or finger for more shallow points, but oftentimes an S-shaped wand, which is called a pelvic wand or an S-shaped wand. In some stores, cervix wand is a good one to help us navigate the points internally that are actually storing a lot of tension and that require our attention and our release. So just for anyone who doesn't know what trigger points are, they're kind of like having a kink in your neck that we want to relieve after an uncomfortable night of sleep. So the way that we hold tension in our tension holding patterns in general in our body create tension, and absolutely in our vagina create this tightness that we require to pay attention to. So with a finger or with the S-shaped wand, what we do is we locate a point that feels tight, tense, and in this case, even though the golden rule is for us not to experience pain during dilating, trigger point release is going to feel painful at times. So you may find a point that's painful. And what we want to do is we want to put gentle amounts of pressure, just like you are testing a tomato for ripeness, onto that trigger point and just hold there while you breathe deeply until you find some sort of release. That can be almost a subtle sort of deep breath and then a decrease of the tightness or tension. That may be the pain going away. That may also be tears and an emotional release. Or, as has happened for me on multiple occasions, is with holding that tightness, we actually have what arises in our consciousness to be a memory that we have suppressed and is now actually coming online for us to work with. So it's very true and very real that we store particular scenes, memories, experiences in our body that are then accessible through physical touch with such release. Okay, now on top of holding the point, we can also be moving our leg in and out in order to shorten and lengthen the muscles that we're actually working with. And this is another great tip. And the other point that I'm going to mention is that it's really important to not swipe through the 12 o'clock and 6 o'clock positions if you imagine your pelvic floor to be like a clock, because we don't want to be swiping through where the clitoris is, and we don't want to be swiping through where the coccyx is, where all of those muscles actually attach at the tailbone. Those are the two areas where you've got to take the pelvic wand out, move it over to the other side, and start trigger point release again. We don't want to swipe through the top. We don't want to swipe through the bottom by keeping that pelvic wand inside and going through this motion. So if you get to this side, working with shallow and deep muscles, you want to take it out. You want to put it in on the other side, and then you want to continue on the other side. And same thing for where the clitoris is. Now, I have video guidance on this in the Pleasant and Effective Dilating course, and I highly encourage you to watch this video guidance so that you have more of a clarity with how to do trigger point release, because it's important that we're feeling confident about this if we're doing it by ourselves at home. And of course, being supported by a pelvic floor physical therapist to do this in person is also a great way to approach this part of the practice if that actually feels safer for you. I also coach people on how your partner can actually support you in this so that you don't have to be the one holding the pelvic wand, reaching over, engaging those core muscles, which doesn't always help, right? Because we're adding more tension and tightness with that. It makes the process a little bit more complicated. So a partner, if you do have one, can be involved in this as well, just like a pelvic floor physical therapist may be. And then you can lay back and relax and fully be able to focus on relaxation rather than going through the motions. Okay, Elle, so I'm looking into the comments again. Let me know if you've got questions about this, because I'd love to answer those right now before we go. And being with me in here in the Zoom room, if you've got a question, I invite you to let me know whether you want to type it or speak it out. Okay, I'm not seeing anything come through. I know there's a slight delay. And if we don't have any other comments, I want you to know that I'm a real person. I'm accessible through email, through messages on Instagram or Facebook, comments on the YouTube channel, and my commitment is to get back to you. So know that there's always that two-way connection and feedback that you can receive from me. So if you've got any questions, you're welcome to comment, schedule a private consultation on my website if that feels best, to have that time together that's just carved out for you and me. And of course, like I said, there's beautiful resources on my website with my courses and amazing things coming to create opportunities for connection inside of our Vaginismus Sisters community. So that might feel like the next way you want to get involved. So I'm wishing you an amazing day. I love that a few of you were live with me this round. I would love for that to happen more and more so that we can have real-time conversations and chats, and so I can get to know you better. And says, thank you for the information today. You're very, very welcome, and looking forward to get to know you. Okay, bye everyone.